If you haven't already, please check out the preview video I made for hiking the Outer Mountain Loop in a day, and also the video of the actual Outer Mountain Loop hike. The hike was really successful, and despite the fatigue towards the end, I really had a great time. I enjoyed obviously the beauty of the desert and the mountains at Big Bend, but also just the challenge of seeing how fast I could complete the hike carrying everything I needed with me. I was already in pretty good shape when I wrote my training program for this, but I knew I needed to increase the amount of distance I could complete at one time. I wrote the program in mid-September. I'm not going to go over what I did in great detail, which would really take too long, but I will provide the mileage that I did each week and the notable workout for that week. I'll get to that in a little bit here. I'll put that up on the screen in a little while. My main goal for training was to gradually increase the distance on my longer workout for the week, whether that was a hike or a run or a combination of both. My longest training session was a hike combined with some jogging at the Balcones Canyonlands National Wildlife Refuge, which is a little ways northwest of Cedar Park, Texas. I did 20.5 miles that day, carrying approximately everything I needed for the Outer Mountain Loop hike. Overall, for training I used a treadmill a lot, only for the ability to simulate long climbs. Every time I got on the treadmill, I set it to 15% slope, no matter what. Every time I walked, I carried my backpack with my normal hiking supplies, besides food and water, other than what I needed for the actual workout, and then also additional weight. I varied between 20 and 27.5 pounds, just using weight plates. Going too heavy with weight wouldn't have benefited me as much, but I wanted to carry a little more weight than what I would be carrying on the actual hike. So the 20 to 27.5 pounds of additional weight, plus the backpack and its contents, and maybe up to 2 small water bottles and a little food worked out pretty well. So the total weight that I was carrying was usually anywhere from 25 to 35 pounds. In addition to all the running and walking, I still lifted weights and strength trained pretty consistently up until about 2.5 to 3 weeks before the hike. It was really the time factor towards the end that made me skip the lifting. Otherwise, I would have kept it up too. I did legs or full body workouts 1 to 2 times a week, and then the other workouts would just be upper body. I focused a lot on leg stability and endurance, but I also kept up with the deadlifts, which is something I enjoy doing. And then I used a local trail close to where I live, which has a few long hills on it, which are maybe 2 to 4% slope. I do both runs and walks on there. I started doing combination workouts where I would mostly walk but also jog the downhills, and this was while carrying the backpack. I often jog a little bit on the downhill of trails and hikes anyway, so I was kind of used to this. Still, if you are going to go this route, just be careful, especially running with the backpack on, and this is a little bit different. It's great training, but you have to know your limits, and obviously don't go beyond those, or you could potentially injure yourself. Okay, I'll put up on the screen here the recap of my training program, just showing the overall mileage that I did, and then the most notable workout for that week. You'll see that my overall mileage for each week was relatively low, considering I was training for a 31-mile hike. The most important point was gradually increasing the long workout. Not even necessarily every week either, but just overall I was getting longer and longer on the long workout. I was initially going to do a time trial of Guadalupe Peak on the same trip, but ended up going home a day early. So where you see Guadalupe Peak is where I was simulating that. Anyway, if you want to read through all this, just put the video on pause. Someday I'll do a video about strength training, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. All the strength training that I've done over the years really helps me on the downhills of hikes. I'm just so used to controlling weight on the way down that most of the time the downhills are really easy for me. Okay, talking about the trail just a little bit here. I had done a few sections of the Outer Mountain Loop trail system on other hikes that I've done at Big Bend, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. For the most part, just expect the trail to be pretty rocky, especially on the steeper sections. Usually on the level sections, or at least on some of the level sections, they were a little bit less rocky, but for the most part, the trail is pretty rocky. I was a little concerned with potentially losing the trail, especially on the Dodson Trail, but it was pretty well marked with the rock piles and pretty easy to follow. when you're going over the washes or through the washes, you just have to look for the rock piles to find your exit points. And for me, they were pretty easy to find, so I had no problems with that. And it was still dark when I descended the steeper section of the Juniper Canyon Trail. I know it was rocky, I remember that. I probably caught my foot and started the trip at least 20 times, but never fell completely. But it was pretty rocky and pretty steep there. And on that note, I did trip and fall completely one time on the Dodson Trail. I was going too fast and just didn't pick my foot up high enough to get over this rock and ended up falling pretty hard on my hands. That was the only fall that I had to. So overall, the trails are easy to follow. Overall, they're pretty rocky. That's basically it. Walking in the washes downhill is actually good for minimizing impact, but going uphill in the washes, especially on the Blue Creek section, is pretty hard because every time you push to propel yourself forward, you sink into the gravel a little bit, so that did make it difficult. But overall, trails were good, pretty easy to follow, just rocky. So some of the things that I would have done differently, knowing what I know now after completing the Outer Mountain Loop, I would have definitely started later. I would have started when it was light out. I would have had one light source with me in case I potentially needed it, but otherwise I would have started in the light. I would have been a lot faster that way. Would have had to carry a little bit less weight, and overall probably wouldn't have caught my foot as much going downhill on the Juniper Canyon Trail. It would have been a little bit easier overall. So definitely starting in the lights. I would have carried less water for sure. I ended up using about a gallon. So I had 3 liters left over. So that would have been potentially 6 pounds less that I could have carried on the entire hike. And that would have saved me, I don't know how much time, but it would have definitely made a difference. I also probably wouldn't have filmed as much. I did take probably 30 to 45 minutes of footage, maybe even more. Just trying to go too fast. A lot of it when I'm filming the trail as I'm walking, it's just shaking too much, as you can probably see. So I would have just cut out the time I was doing that and ended up probably being a little bit faster that way too. Another thing I would have changed was slowing down at the end. I would have definitely slowed down, made sure my GPS watch was in focus so I could have filmed the watch clearly as I was finishing, but oh well. Alright, here are a few tips for hiking the Outer Mountain Loop. You can probably apply these to a multi-day hike as well as if you are going to attempt it in one day. First thing would be start in the light, and this is pretty obvious if you want to take in the views. For myself, I'd seen the first section of the trail a few times, so I didn't really feel I was missing anything by starting in the dark. And the main reason I started so early was just to give myself enough time to finish if I potentially needed it. I'd rather start in the dark versus finish in the dark when I'm fatigued. But it's definitely a lot easier to hike in the daytime versus hiking at night. Second tip would be, if you are in good shape, don't be overwhelmed by what you may read about the difficulty of the Outer Mountain Loop. I'm in pretty good shape. It's hard to kind of compare your level of fitness with someone else unless you do the same thing under basically the same circumstances. But if you feel you're in pretty good shape, if you run a lot, if you work out a lot, if you've hiked a lot and you know what you're getting into, don't feel that this is going to be a difficult trail. It's really not. I hike as much as I can and I train a lot, and I even wondered, based on what I was reading, not that I wouldn't get it done, but just I wondered if this was going to be as easy as I was thinking it potentially could be. Not saying it was easy if you push it, but I did kind of question as to whether or not I could get this done as fast as I thought I could. I thought, yeah, it might take a lot longer based on some of the trip reports I read. So that being said, if you are in good shape, yeah, don't be overwhelmed. Don't feel that this is something you can't complete, because it's not that difficult. Especially if you don't push it, take your time and just give yourself enough time. Just be prepared just in case. You never know. I think that's true for every hike. I had enough with me that if I really needed to, I could have sheltered somewhere overnight and been okay. Yeah, I may not have been comfortable, but I would have been fine. I had with me extra spandex pants, spandex leggings, extra long sleeve shirts, a hat and gloves, the emergency blanket, and if worse came to worse, the ability to start a fire if I really needed to. The thing with the Outer Mountain Loop, though, especially unless you're doing it for some reason when no one else is out there, you're probably going to have some company somewhere along the trail, no matter what section of the trail you're in. So it's not as if there won't be any people around. And obviously with technology the way it is today, with the cell phones and everything, it's not like you're really putting yourself at too much risk. I did the hike in running shoes, but you may want to consider wearing boots. I don't think you'd be super uncomfortable in running shoes, but if you're used to hiking in boots, you may just want to go that route. I was pretty scratched up, both on my hands and on my legs especially, so some kind of tougher pants would definitely help save your legs from that. And just obviously have some extra clothing with you, because you never know when you may need it. My last tip would be this: to prepare yourself for the Outer Mountain Loop, actually go off trail. All the off-trail stuff that I've been doing just makes the trails seem so much easier. So if you want to prepare for a trail, go off-trail. Okay, well, I hope you found this video informative and helpful, and I hope you learned something from it. That being said, use the information you got from this video wisely. Know your limits and know your physical ability. If something is overwhelming to you, don't attempt it. Just do what you feel comfortable with and prepare yourself. Try something a little bit shorter, try something off trail. Just make sure you know what you're getting into before you attempt this in one day or even as a multi-day hike. That being said, definitely a multi-day hike would make this pretty easy and definitely more enjoyable, and you definitely have all the time in the world to take in some fantastic views at Big Bend.